Our next derivative rule is the product rule. Now, we've talked about the basic rules. We have the power rule. We have the constant multiplier, the derivative of a constant. We have the derivative of the sum. So notice I have here, this is x to the third times sine of x. This is our new piece. This is the product rule. Now, we know we already have this derivative rule. We know if I have x to the third plus sine of x, the derivative of the sum is the sum of the derivatives. So this is 3x to the second plus the derivative here is cosine of x. And that's all there is to it. We're finished. It's all over but the shouting. But for products, the rule is more complicated. The derivative of the product is not simply multiply the derivatives. It doesn't work that way. And after I go through this, the next video, I'll go through a proof of why the power rule is the way it is. For now, we're going to accept this as a given expression, and then the proof will come later. And so the rule is this. If I have the derivative, if we want the derivative of two functions multiplied together, right? The derivative of f times g. The rule is this. It is f of x times g prime of x. We're mixing the notations here. F of x times g prime of x plus g of x times f prime of x. Now that might seem cumbersome and troublesome. Students, it's the rare student that has any trouble getting this in their comfort zone. Because the way to think of this is the first times the derivative of the second, just conceptually. First times the derivative of the second plus the second times derivative of the first. First times derivative of the second plus second times derivative of the first. First times derivative of the second plus second times the derivative of the first. Now you can rearrange, of course, you could rearrange these terms. Some people put this for term and they rearrange the derivatives. There are about several different ways of writing this. They're all equivalent. Whichever one of those you learn, that's fine by me. This is the one I learned. This is what I'm giving you. Some people learn this as they do it backwards, which is just fine. Derivative of the first times the second plus the first times the derivative. I mean, they can learn in a different sequence, and if you learn it that way, that's fine. I don't know all the mathematics in the world, but I can do the product rule. So however you do the product rule, so long as it's correct, you're good to go. And so there is a nice rule of thumb that we're going to use with the product rule. The next three rules are going to be the product rule, the chain rule, and the quotient rule. Those are the big three. Product rule, chain rule, quotient rule, and chain rule. Product rule, quotient rule, chain rule. Each one of those involves, when you work on your Word doc, when you're writing a speech or something, or turning in a paper in some English class, you very often will copy something, copy and paste, copy, paste. You don't retype everything, copy, paste. Each one of these requires copy, paste. If you work, I'll show you what this means in just a minute. If you do the product rule and you did not copy and paste, I'm telling you right now, it's wrong somewhere. Something's wrong somewhere. If you do the quotient rule and you don't do copy and paste, it's wrong. Go fix it. Somewhere, if you're doing the chain rule, whenever we get to the chain rule, we'll talk about that. The chain rule requires copy, paste. If you don't copy and paste, you did something wrong. Product rule, quotient rule, chain rule, all require you to copy, paste. At least as a mental structure, sort of as a mental way. It's just a way to think of it. You don't literally need to do something on a computer, but you're still just copying something and pasting it down. So, in this particular case, this is first function, this is second. First, so I want the derivative of f. What you do not do. You do not do derivative times derivative and put a box around it like you're proud of it. That is wrong, wrong, wrong. I had Calculus 3 students a couple semesters ago doing this, and it just about drove me bananas thinking, how in the world did they get to Calculus 3 and they haven't learned the basic product rule from Chapter 2 in Calc 1? I don't know how it happens. It shouldn't have happened, and they had a rough go in Calc 3, let me tell you that. But it is not simply the derivative of the first and derivative of the second. It's the first times derivative of the second plus the second times the derivative of the first. It's the first times the derivative of the second plus the second times the derivative of the first. Students, I get exams when we do class that's in person, and I hand out physical copies of exams. I get students giving me their little memory device. They'll do 1 times 2 prime plus 2 times 1 prime. First times derivative of the second plus second times the derivative of the first. If that helps you, that's wonderful. If that little memory device helps you. I've had students do first times derivative of the second plus second times the derivative of the first. If that helps you, that's wonderful. Whatever it takes, get a memory device, get something, but you learn the product rule. And so what I need is the first, and here it is. When I say the first, I just mean that. I don't mean 3x squared. I mean just the first function. So all you need to do is copy, paste. It is the first, not changed in any way, shape, or form. It is the first, copy, paste. First times, now you do derivative of the second. Now you're showing off. First times the derivative of the second, but you're not done, plus product rule, starts with a P, and you're doing plus. Product rule is plus. Product rule is plus. Product rule is plus. Guess what students very often forget? They forget that the product rule starts with a P, plus starts with a P. Product rule is plus. So, first times derivative of the second plus the second function. You don't do anything to it. You just write down the second function. Once again, you copy, paste, sign of x. Don't change it in any way, shape, or form. First times derivative of the second plus the second, copy, paste. Now times the derivative of the first, which in this case is 3x squared. And I have students do this all the time. They'll do this. They don't want to take any chances. That's fine by me. Leave those parentheses in there. First times derivative of the second plus second times the derivative of the first, and you're done. Sometimes those parentheses are required, and we'll see that as we go along here. Sometimes those parentheses are required, but it's never wrong to have extra parentheses. So now the only thing left to do is practice this. So suppose I have h of x is 6x to the third plus 4x times the function cosine of x plus 1. Okay, I want the derivative of that function. All right, h prime of x is equal to, well, how about this? How about pause the video and see if you can do that? So go ahead and pause the video, work that out. All right, let's see if I can get it right now too. So this is the first times derivative of the second. So here we go. There. Product rule. First times derivative of the second plus second times the derivative of the first. All you got to do is plug all the values in. First is copy, paste. Right? Copy, paste. So no change. First. Now you do need these parentheses here. It would be wrong not to have them because this is, if this is a binomial or more, if this has more than one term, these parentheses are needed. If this has more than one term down here, you need these parentheses. First times, now times derivative of the second. What's the derivative of cosine? Derivative of cosine is negative sine. Plus 1, just to be official here, I'll put 0. Now you don't need to write plus 0 yet. let's just I'm doing this just for emphasis here. All right, just for emphasis, I'm putting the plus 0. All right, plus second, copy paste, times derivative of the first, and so that's 18 x squared, and what's the other one? Plus 4, and you're out. If all you're asked to do is find the derivative, then you do not need to simplify your result. If you need to simplify your result for some other reason, then I'll make you simplify the result. If all I ask you to do, if all the directions ask you to do, if all you're asked to do is compute the derivative, then all you need to do is compute the derivative and then just let it sit there, back away slowly. Don't try to simplify it. What happens is students, they get the derivative part correctly, then they go about trying to show off, trying to simplify it when they don't need to. They try to simplify it and then they mess up the algebra. So if all you're asked to do is find the derivative, just find the derivative and leave it alone. There's something else I want to emphasize here. See how I started using my parentheses? Suppose you didn't do that. Now, I'm going to do this in this kind of, I don't know what color this is. This shows up a kind of a brownish red color. This is going to be something you want to be cautious. You don't want to do this. First, times derivative of the second. Times, I want all of this times this. Now, what's the derivative here is, this does not first times the derivative of the second. This does not say this stuff times negative sign. This says this stuff minus sign. If there's a negative here, anytime there's a negative in front of this derivative, you stinking better have that in parentheses. These are stinking required. And this is still wrong, because what I have written here is not 6x to the third plus 4x, quantity times that. The only thing multiplied is these two. Anytime this derivative has more than one term, any time this derivative has more than one term, you need to have it grouped. Otherwise, the algebra is messed up. Anytime this derivative, anytime this expression in the derivative is more than one term, or anytime the copy and paste is more than one term. This is the copy and paste portion. Somewhere else it might be the derivative portion. Anytime this is more than one term, you should have it in parenthesis. In parenthesis, you're much, much more likely to get it correctly. Anytime the derivative starts with a negative sign, put it in parenthesis. You're much more likely to get it correctly. First time, now this is now correct. This is now first in parenthesis, and that's why you saw me do this earlier. And this, to this day, this is my practice. If I'm going to use the product rule, I'm doing that. At the very least, I'm doing it mentally, if not actually physically writing it out. Better to write it out this way and get it correctly than to try to juggle things mentally and botch things up. So, a couple things. If this derivative is more than one term, you need to be careful to make that in parenthesis. If the derivative starts with a negative sign, put it in parenthesis. That's the safest way to do things. There are ways to get around it, but that's the safest way to do things. You know as well as I do that the most common mistake you've ever made in your entire history of algebra is dropping a negative sign. Well, there's a negative sign here just waiting to get dropped. And if you're not careful, that's what's going to happen here. If the derivative starts with a negative sign, put it in parenthesis. If the derivative, any piece of this derivative, if any piece of it is binomial or more, put it in parenthesis. That'll help keep you from making mistakes that you don't even need to know they're there if you do this process by putting in the parentheses. So what's left to do is to practice this over and over and over and over again. So let's see if we can do that a couple times, and I think you'll have the feel for it. So what do we have here? We have, suppose f of x is sine of x times, let's say, cosine of x. What's the derivative of that? Well, there's the first, there's the second. It is first times derivative of the second plus second times derivative of the first. There we go. All our workers are lined up. Another nice thing about doing this is sometimes students get this and they stop because they think they're done. Or they get this and they get distracted on the phone and they come back and try to, I think I'm done. No, this lets you know you need to find 4 things. First, copy paste times derivative of the second. Derivative of cosine is negative sine of x. Remember, if it starts with a negative, you need them. They're needed here. First times derivative of the second plus second, copy, paste, times derivative of the first, that's cosine. If all you're asked to do is to find the derivative, you are done. If all you're asked to do is find the derivative, you're done. There are going to be some cases where I am specifically going to tell you not to simplify it. If you are specifically directed not to simplify, then if you write the simplified version, you are not getting full credit out of me. There's a reason I'm doing it. You don't need to know the reason. It'll come down the road at you soon enough. If you hang around long enough, it'll come at you, oh, that's why. If I specifically tell you not to simplify, which is very often what I'll do on the exam, if I specifically say don't simplify, then don't simplify. If you did need to simplify this for some reason, you know how to do that. Sine times negative sine is negative sine squared. You know trigonometry. And cosine times cosine is positive cosine squared. This doesn't go to 1 because this is negative, and so this is finished. If you want the simplified version, there it is. If you do not want the simplified version for some reason, there it is. Product rule. First times the derivative of the second plus second times the derivative of the first. We can do umpteen different examples. It's always going to be the same. First times the derivative of the second plus the second times the derivative of the first.